My name's Haniya. I work in PR, so PR and marketing really. I've worked for Green Lane Masjid and for MEND, currently working for a hydrogen company, head of PR and communications. I became Muslim when I was about 24, 25 years old. There were lots of reasons, so there's no one reason, there was no one life-changing experience. It was several reasons, and I think one of them was the stage that I was at in my life where I'd finished university, I had got my career. There was a choice that I had to make of which direction my life was going to go in terms of marriage. So, yes, one of the reasons was marriage, but I think it was more than that. Well, I know it was definitely more than that because, Islam had been on my radar for about 5 years and I hadn't accepted Islam. But then the moment where I had to make a decision, I started reading the Quran. And that really surprised me because I learned so much, just stories of Isa alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam. These surprised me. I didn't know that they were in the Quran. So that was beautiful. And I just kept wanting to read more. Everything that was going on in Gaza at the time, really, it was so disturbing. I couldn't understand it. I went to a march and, I met Muslims from all sorts of backgrounds, which again, I didn't know existed. So that was an eye opener. But when they were chanting the shahadah, I was terrified. But the more they chanted it, the more I felt like I wanted to be a part of it. And there were so many little things. Death, I wanted to know what happens when you die. I found that my own religion back then didn't really give me a definite answer. There was contradictions. So Islam gave me the answer. I think as a female as well, I was living a very luxury kind of life. I had all the freedom in the world and it wasn't good for me. I didn't like who I was at that time. I genuinely didn't feel happy in the state that I was in. So one of the biggest reasons for me, and I think when you think about why did you become Muslim? I think that's that's a question that should be in the present, like, why are you Muslim? And it's not something we think about every day, but it's a question that comes to reverts quite a lot. No matter how long you've been Muslim, someone will still question you to say, why are you Muslim today? And for me, why I became Muslim in the first place is almost irrelevant. It's great, it makes a nice story, it inspires people, but I feel like it's almost like, well, actually, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened my heart, gave me signs, opened my heart, and that's it. I became Muslim. Why am I still Muslim? Why am I Muslim today? Why am I raising my children as Muslim when I could go back to my old state? What prevents me from going back to my old state is the more important question, I think. And it brings you back to the very day that you took your Shahada as well. So for me, it is still a case that, look, as a woman, I feel like I know myself better in the eyes of Islam. I respect myself better in the eyes of Islam. I hold more value and dignity in the boundaries of Islam. And I love that. I absolutely love it. I was I had this feminist streak in me before, but now I truly appreciate what feminism is. That's not to say that it's in Islam, but it is to say that actually there is this status of women in Islam that is just, it's amazing. And I didn't find that anywhere else. So, alhamdulillah, today I am Muslim mainly because it is that status of women and the stories of the women in Islam. But there are so many other reasons and I could go on forever. The reaction was horrible. So my parents, my family, brother, sister, aunts, cousin, uncles, we were incredibly close. I was very, very close to them. I barely had friends because I was so close to my family. And the day that I told them that, I'm getting married, I know they understood that it was a case of me becoming Muslim as well. So they just completely abandoned me, is how I felt. They rejected me, they ostracized me, they put my things in bags and said, don't come back. And, I got a message from my cousin calling me a selfish, B-worder. And there was all sorts of things. And I haven't heard from most of them to this day. They still don't want to know me. And that was the hardest thing. It still is the hardest thing that I have ever been through in my life. But when it comes to my mom, she's always been in and out, in and out. Nowadays, alhamdulillah, I can say it's more constant. I do get to speak to her and see her after 14 years, but alhamdulillah, you go through phases. I think there's something called grief stages that you go through. And I think I probably went through all of them. And now I'm at the stage, maybe it's because, I've got a teenage daughter now, but now I'm at the stage where I think, it's not their fault. When it comes to my parents, siblings is a different conversation. But when it comes to my parents, I don't blame them at all. And I completely understand. They raised me and they had their expectations of me that I didn't fulfill. They loved me, and then I did something so like against them. And, how do they recover from that type of hurt themselves? I gained something. I can have that understanding because, I have that fear of the akhirah. So, there's a different level of forgiveness and mercy when you fear your akhirah. But for them, they don't have that at the level that Islam teaches. I think I'm at the stage now where I just love them a lot and I appreciate everything that they've done for me. And I love my mum to bits for still being in my life. And I don't hold it against them at all. I think they've gone through a huge difficulty as well. I think a lot of Indian girls, especially, this is their main struggle. They lose their families, and that changes you, whether they realize it there and then, whether they're going to realize it like I did after 14, 15 years. The day that your father says to you, don't come back home, and cuts you off and doesn't want anything to do with you, is the day that you had to basically grow up, but painfully. And it's a very lonely experience. You're very vulnerable, you're very exposed, you're very desperately seeking validation and seeking love from the wrong places. And it's really scary. And you're living with that trauma every day, but you can't get over it because you're still getting on with everyday life. You still have to get up in the morning. You still have to, like, go to work or look after children or whatever it is you're doing. And it's hard to just sit with that feeling that, hold on a second, this happened to me. And I think a lot of reverts go through that. A lot of reverts go through that. They realize at a certain point in their life that, oh my days, this happened to me and I'm a completely different person. Not to say that it's completely negative. Alhamdulillah, we have our deen from the day that we took our shahadah. And I think for a lot of people, that's the only reason they're still alive, because by day, you're really happy and alhamdulillah, you're getting on with life and you're learning so much about deen. And then at night or at any moment that you might have a second to pause, it's the most excruciating pain in the heart that reaches the stomach, that reaches the feet, that will eventually shoot right up, back up to the mind, that doesn't allow you to sleep. I spent so many years trying to understand, what should I do? Because how do you treat your parents? I remember the first few years were constantly researching, asking people, and I came back with the same answer every time. How do you treat your parents? How do you be good to your parents when they don't want to know you or they don't accept you as a Muslim? Like, what is the status then of that relationship? Because, you're hurting your parents every day. That's something hard to live with. But then you understand that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you to obey your parents under every command other than the one that says, move away from Islam or anything that prevents you from practicing your deen. And you have to live with that. And you're living with basically a principle that is only iman. It's your iman. How strong is your iman that you can keep on doing that to your mum or your dad based on something you've read in the Quran? Because it's not easily done. Alhamdulillah, the deen does keep you strong. And a case of, remembering this and remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests those who He loves, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you according to your level of iman as well. And then reminding yourself that, okay, you might not have that love, that security, that protection in this dunya of a family, but inshallah you'll have it in the akhirah. And then that just keeps you going. I think just from my experience, and I've come to know a lot of Indian girls that have come into the deen, I think there's a problem with a wali when you don't have a male figure in your life. So you've grown up always having one, whether it's a brother, father, or, sometimes I know people that have come from families where they didn't actually have a male figure, but they had like strong mother or someone. So losing that, like I said, it changes you and it puts you in positions where you'll tolerate things that you shouldn't tolerate. And Islam teaches you that you don't need to tolerate this. But because you don't have that male voice, and it's so important, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in pairs. If you don't have that male voice, that male security and ration and reason, you're just so emotionally led that you're not making the right decisions. You feel very alone. There's no one to go to. So I think that's a huge problem in our community. I think that revert girls, especially when they're so young, there has to be someone available. And whether that's an imam at the masjid or, some sort of, I don't really know how to do it, because boundaries of segregation, but there has to be something there where a sister, when reverts come in to the deen, they have someone to go to, someone that they can trust, someone that's not biased in any way. I have heard about it, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic idea. This was one of the things that I thought, yeah, this is amazing. And I was so happy that Solace had come up with this because, addressing these concerns before marriage is the best thing to do. Like to understand reverts before you marry one, to understand that, it's not going to be a case of where you might have in-laws or if you husband and wife are struggling, the wife can go to her family. That's a blessing that people have. If you have a child, the mother will help. That's a huge blessing, and not all
Definitely.
readers have that. So to understand what you're getting into, to help brothers understand that, this is what it's like, can be like. Sorry, I shouldn't victimize all reverts, by the way. So many of them are so strong, and they have amazing support systems. And I am really overgeneralizing here, but I still think it's such a valuable thing. And a lot of reverts struggle to get married as well because they're not integrated within the community, and it's difficult for them. I knew about Solace because a friend of mine, she worked for Solace, and she told me firsthand the impact that Solace has for reverts. And from just a simple phone call, consoling someone, there's a lot of barakah. I'm sure there's a hadith for the person who eases the pain and the suffering of another person. There's great reward in it, and this is what Solace does. There has to be organizations like this, that we have to have them. So mashallah, it's brilliant what Solace do.